when I was 15 years old, my father died in a tragic accident to which I discovered him. And so the way that I term it is there was a crack in my universe. I was just hitting that age to where a father really starts to bestow what is biblical manhood on you, right? Because as great of a job as my mother did and tried to do, manhood is bestowed from a man. It's not bestowed from a woman. And so I didn't have that opportunity. My father up to this point had only led me down the path of right and wrong.
Welcome to the 1334 podcast. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Lanier. I believe you will leave today inspired and encouraged to continue living out your God-given dreams. Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. From J.K. Rowling. Where does your recovery story begin?
Recovery, I think, always starts at rock bottom. So from a recovery standpoint, it began in federal prison. There was a lot that led up to that. And so recovery begins with the notion, the revelation that you're not in control and that you can't do this all by yourself. And so time-wise, I was walking a track in federal prison and was basically struck down by an inner voice when I'm walking and I'm trying to sort out what the rest of my life was going to look like, you know, as human nature always is, right? I'm sitting there trying to plan the next 20 years and how I'm going to do something from within inside the high fence of a prison, if that makes sense. But I'm walking the track one day, which is where a lot of men go and, you know, get in motion and just start trying to think and clear their head. And so I'm out there walking one day and I get struck down by this inner voice that literally levels me and brings me to my knees and tells me, you've got to stop living for yourself. Because everything that had led up to that point was essentially me living for myself, making decisions for myself, thinking that I was in control. And one thing that I've learned in this life, I may not know much, but one thing I do know is that you are not in control. And the moment you think that you have it all together and that you're going to just have it all at your fingertips and that you're pulling the strings is really the moment that things will begin to fall apart for you. Sometimes it takes a long time for the end to come or that rock bottom. But as I like to say, I did a dead cat bounce off that rock bottom. And when you're in that valley and you're on your knees looking up, you know, that mountain is very high. And so for me, that rock bottom came really through the realization walking that track that day that I don't have any of this. And so what is next? And that is what really embarked me on my journey of giving my life to Christ and just letting go.
What did it feel like to be at that rock bottom? In that moment, do you remember what it felt like?
I would say it was a purging of sorts to where I've never felt so empty. Mm-hmm. It was literally like a force came in and just took your inner being, if you will, if you can put that in your headspace. And it was just a sense of complete emptiness, not in a negative way, but just like, all right, the runway has been cleared. Mm-hmm. Like it is now the weight that you've been carrying for however many years is gone. It was almost like a floating sensation. And wow. Just a feeling of, okay, I've got to be refilled. I've got to be refueled. Mm-hmm. But it was literally just a sense of this awareness that, okay, the gig is up. The dirty laundry's hanging out to dry. Everybody knows about it. And here's your chance because it's a new start, right? So It's kind of that thing that the Apostle Paul tells us about. Out with the old, in with the new, right? So it was basically a baptism without water at that point in time.
So how was that, like immediately getting into prison, or were you there for a while?
I was there for a little while. It was several months, because in the prison system, you get moved around from prison to prison while you're going to court and things of this nature. So I actually was in what they call transit, or a diesel therapy, because you're on buses and planes from the West Coast back to the East Coast. So I was in and out of prisons, and when you're in that, you're just about survival from a mindset standpoint, because you're being introduced to a new jungle, if you will, however much you're having to be moved around. So a lot of philosophical and theological thought isn't necessarily what's on the forefront of your mind. It's just, okay, how am I going to get through this? But once I landed at what they call the spot, or where you're going to serve, majority of your time, you kind of get settled into a little bit of a routine. And so that's when all these feelings and these notions started to surface.
Yeah. I think it was James Clear I've been hearing him talk about how what happens is your unconscious mind can come back once you have given it the space to do so. Like he's saying, like, when you're in the shower, when you get all those best ideas, that's why. Because you've primed, you were reading or watching or whatever it was, and then when there's nothing else there, your mind is already primed to solve that problem. And it kind of seems like it's the same thing. You were having your diesel therapy, going back and forth, however long it took you to get to your spot. And then finally, all of everything in your unconscious mind was able to kind of just flood out at one time.
Yeah, I'll call it what the Bible says, that when you raise a child up in the ways of the Lord, he will return to it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at it, what I mentioned earlier about the runway being cleared. At that point in time, that was God telling me, all right, I'm bringing you back to where you all started. So it's that effective calling of God, right? That, all right, here's your chance. I'm going to lay it out in front of you, and I'm going to make the path clear for you. And if you'll just order your steps in this way, here's your journey begins.
That's cool. Yeah. Seems like it was a freeing moment.
I didn't realize how freeing it was at the time, but yes, it was, I hope I never have to feel what it feels like to have that heavy of a load released from me ever again.
Yeah. So what led you to that moment?
As far as action or life or...
Yeah, so where does that story begin to get you to rock bottom?
So that story begins with the death of my father. I was 15 years old. I was a month shy of turning 16. Previous to that, life had been great. It had been idyllic. Grew up with a great childhood, great loving parents, supportive, kind of a storybook type of childhood. However, on that fateful day, when I was 15 years old, my father died in a tragic accident, to which I discovered him. And so the way that I term it is, there was a crack in my universe, because in a matter of seconds, essentially, something happened internally inside of me. And that crack in that universe altered me for many, many, many years to come. So because of that crack in the universe, I call it falling through. I slipped through the crack and stayed down there a long time, or what the word refers to as the pit. I was in the pit. And so not having handled the death of my father correctly, not having walked that out with, therapy, with people who offered to help, with all the resources that were offered to me, but thinking, oh, I'm just going to take this on myself. I've got this. That was the launch pad for everything that came after that, and ultimately culminating in 106 months federal prison sentence.
Wow. Yeah, it's though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It's if you don't know, if it's not rooted in you, you will still fear, and that's a moment that I don't think anyone deserves to walk through, but life just kind of happens sometimes.
It does. And, it's amazing how, regardless of the training, the exposure, what your parents tried to do, ultimately, things are going to happen, right? And so I don't blame anyone but myself. I had decisions to make. I had choices to make. But when you don't handle things the right way, and when you don't get the care and the treatment and things along those lines that you need, and if you're not willing to receive it, then ultimately you're going to end up in prison in some way, shape, form, or fashion. You may not be staring at razor wire, but it could be emotionally, could be mentally. You're going to end up in a prison.
Yep.
And so I feel like I've in some ways served several different prison sentences, not just physically, but also through the emotional and the spiritual side. But
Yeah.
My biggest thing is always just to tell men or women, even if I'm talking to them, that unction when they realize that, okay, you're at a crossroads here, that is, I always kind of say that's God knocking on your door. He tells us in his word to ask, seek, and knock, but sometimes he'll knock on your door and sometimes very slightly nudge you. Sometimes he'll slap you in the face, I feel. But it took a lot of slapping and not so much nudging for me. But the death of my father was definitely the catalyst for what was to come.
Yeah. Was it a journey of, from that moment, getting around the wrong people? Or is it something that you began to seek after?
Well, I think it was a mindset of, so when you go from being a 15-year-old kid to basically being the patriarch, if you will, because I had two sisters and a mother. So for whatever reason, it was embedded in me that, I needed to look out for them, that I needed to be a strength because everybody around me was falling apart emotionally, right? Because I look at it from my mom's standpoint, life's ticking along, and then one day she wakes up and her whole world's turned upside down. She goes from, being a wife and a mother of three to now being a single mother of three and all that comes with that, and has just lost the love of her life, right? So there's that. And then I have two sisters. And so I took on the notion of, well, they no longer have a father. I'm the only male figure in their life. So I've got to take on that level of strength. And what does that look like? And so it actually kind of metastasized inside of me, just this notion of, all right, you're going to be a man. You're going to show everybody how tough you are. You're going to show everybody that you've got this. And you're going to go after the world and you're going to conquer it. And that was because I was just hitting that age to where a father really starts to bestow what is biblical manhood on you, right? Because as great of a job as my mother did and tried to do, manhood is bestowed from a man. It's not bestowed from a woman. And so I didn't have that opportunity. My father up to this point had only led me down the path of right and wrong. There's a bit of a difference, So now that I didn't really have that manhood bestowed upon me, I just woke up every day defining what I thought a man was and what it looked like. And that is very dangerous ground to be on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not the place for a kid to take on the role of a parent as well.
No, it's not. And when you take it as seriously as I did, it kind of developed an extremist mindset in me that there was nothing that would stop me from protecting my family, getting to the goals that I wanted to achieve, because I didn't realize that through manhood, sometimes it's okay to say I don't have this, or sometimes it's okay to cry, or sometimes it's okay to be vulnerable, or to accept help, things of that nature. It was not embedded in me. And so with the lack of that, you just kind of turn into a savage in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So where does your story pick up after you're in prison, you have reached rock bottom, and you finally feel that the runway's cleared? Where do you go from there?
Well, oddly enough, in that same moment that I was struck down by that inner voice that told me to stop living for myself, as I am literally on my knees out here on this walking track, I hear another voice, but it was a human voice. It was not one inside of me. And that human voice basically said, "Hey, man," just like that. All I heard was, "Hey, man." And I look up and there's this hand sitting there reaching out to me. And I look up and there's this man standing there, this pretty large man, as a matter of fact. And he said, I know you're new here and just got here. He said, "I want to just introduce myself to you and let you know that me and some other brothers have a Bible study that we do. And we have a group that we meet pretty much every day. And so if you need to come or you want to come, we'd love to have you."
Wow.
So for sake of time, the conversation was a little longer than that. But in that very moment, he this individual reached out literally and kind of pulled me up and told me to shake it off. And I ended up forming a relationship with this guy. I waited a few days to go and see what this was all about. I was processing. You don't trust anybody. You don't know if you're being set up for something.
Yeah.
But I went and I could see him gathering one day out on the yard. So I just watched from a distance, and I wanted to see what was going on. And lo and behold, he wasn't lying. And they had a group of men that met, and they were sharing the word, life testimonies, basically to the best of their ability, doing life with each other within inside the confines of prison walls. And so just sharing stories, helping each other, listening to each other. And so I got into that, which was way off out of the comfort zone for me, because by nature I'm an introvert, and even more so in a situation like that, right? I did not come from a background of sharing, because I had fortified myself internally just into a rock that was impenetrable. My heart was just as hard as it could be. So sharing my feelings and my thoughts was, that that was not in my bandwidth whatsoever. That was weakness, right?
Yeah.
But I attribute these men with knocking those walls down. And so I started meeting with these men daily. And one thing led to another. And the next thing you know, I'm preaching messages in the church chapel.
Wow.
And leading Bible studies. And I mean, this stuff is just a whirlwind, and definitely was never on my radar to do. I grew up in church, but obviously was very angry with God for things that I blamed him for that were not his fault. And so through these prayer groups, through these small men's group, through these little discipleship opportunities, it completely reshaped my outlook on the world, on life, on people. And I'll share a C.S. Lewis quote with you. C.S. Lewis said, "I believe in Christianity for the same way that I believe in the rising of the sun, not because I see it, but because I see all things by it." And so it was in those groups, in that sharing, in that vulnerability, that I began to see the world through the lens of God's word, not Ryan's word or Ryan's thoughts. And it was way more colorful.
Oh, yeah. So they begin to instill a biblical worldview. Is that kind of, or I imagine that didn't come first. What part came first? Was it the understanding scripture and then the wall started coming down? Or was it the fact you were sharing? What was that journey? What was that journey like?
Well, it was, it kind of was very resemblant of Acts, the way that the church actually started. Here in a prison, you have men of all walks of life. I was an investment banker, right? You got guys who were in there for heavy drug dealing, being linchpins and kingpins, and you got guys in there for robbery. You got all types of walks of life in here. Men that didn't have 1/10 of what I had, or the life that I'd experienced, right? Men that came up very hard, that had been fighting for what little bit they had, even though through criminal activity their whole life. The odds were against them from day one, born into addiction, born into fatherlessness, not in the way of tragedy like I was, but just abandonment.
Yeah.
And so the recurring theme that we all had, and you'll see this in the prison system and a lot of times in addiction as well, is fatherlessness. And so when I began to learn that other men who were nothing like me on the exterior, didn't have the higher education I had, didn't have all the nice vacations and the lifestyle that I had, I began to see that we were actually the same. At the core. We all had the same struggle. And that is, we were partakers in the largest epidemic in the world, in my opinion, which is fatherlessness.
Yep.
And so when I began to know that these men are actually my brothers, because this man may be a cocaine cowboy, but he never had a father. And had he had a father, I'd be willing to bet things may have turned out differently. I lost my father in the manner in which I did, but at the end of the day, at a very crucial and critical age, I didn't have a father moving forward, right? So I allowed society to father me just like these other men did. So it was that coming to the understanding that I was not alone, because I always felt alone. None of my other friends' dads died.
Yeah.
Right. So I always felt alone, and nobody knew my struggles. Nobody knew the weight that I was carrying. And so having that fellowship amongst those men, man, it was just, whew.
Wow. It's really interesting, because the way that the church originally started was essentially masculine men.
Yeah.
It was, yes, you have courage, you're vulnerable because you're courageous. You are strong because you need to protect.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming a well-rounded being like Christ. You're the lion and the lamb. You have to be both in order to be a successful masculine, man with a Christian worldview. You have to find a way to be all of the things. And it's really, if you look at all of the issues in society that go against a biblical worldview, every single one of them is an attack on the family unit.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from drugs, alcohol, porn, all of it is to attack the family unit. It's the enemy trying to find a way to take the man out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see a successful family, that's when you begin to see more of Christ in the family unit, in the children. And it's kind of sad that a lot of the successful men in the world all come from broken, terrible, like, you look at the most successful UFC fighter and he has the worst life. And he's come from either fatherlessness or just complete and total abuse. And you see that many of the people that have come out of all of these things become successful in the world's eyes. But when you begin to look at it through a biblical lens, success is peace, love, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, thankfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That is biblical success. And once you begin to see all of those things, that's when that lens gets flipped. That you begin to see it in a whole different light. And I think that's probably what you began to start seeing was, oh, actually, to be successful, I have to look an entirely different way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also, within this group of men, not everybody has a support group, right? Not everybody has a family to support them or put money on their books while they're incarcerated so they can buy, things they don't even really want off a commissary, but it keeps you alive.
Yeah.
Not everybody has that. And so even amongst these men, I saw other men stepping in and giving up what little bit they had, or sharing what little bit they had with men that they knew didn't have any support system. And so I started seeing, that part of the word play out. Just like in, Acts says, they started breaking bread together. They started sharing what they had for the common good. And I saw that playing out. And so it all the way down to the smallest detail, I started seeing the word play out. And I started realizing, I'd had the successes that you just mentioned that are opposite to fruits of the spirit or biblical, right? I mean, my success was how much money I was making, how many bar fights have I won, all the things, how many girlfriends have I had, all of the things that are matters of the flesh, right? And yet here I was standing in a federal prison, and none of that amounted to anything. But yet now I'm seeing men at the lowest point in their lives who had been in there, who had been incarcerated a lot longer than me. I mean, some of these guys have been down 20 years, and they made it, right? They were thriving, if you want to look at it that way. They were doing well. Their spirits were great. They were doing the Lord's work within inside of a very dark place that at every corner was trying to combat them. And honestly, it's that old cliche, like, I wanted what they had. I knew for me to get through what I was looking at that point in time, I had to have what they had.
Yep.
And I just I can't say that I made like a complete conscious decision at that moment, like, I'm just going to open myself up, and be this role model of a person in here. But I just kind of started going with the flow. And it's kind of the same like when you get in line with God's will for your life. Like, if you go with the flow, then things are much different and way more peaceful than if you're always, if you're like Jacob trying to wrestle with God at every single corner. Good luck to you.
You're going to walk away limping.
You're going to walk away limping. And I think we all have plenty of limps, right?
Yep. I think there's a really cool parallel between starting one way but finishing a complete and total 180. It's, I mean, in the physical, you see a weight loss journey. You see somebody that's, well, let's take Jelly Roll. He's lost like, what, 200, 300 pounds?
3 or 4 people.
Yes. And you start, he was like 500 pounds, and now he's 200 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
You see a huge transformation in the flesh, and you can begin to see that in other people's life in the spirit as well. And I think it's really cool to see that you made that complete 180. You lost 300 pounds essentially.
Right.
Whether it was a figurative weight lifted off, or it was, it was that mental, emotional, spiritual shift that happened. How long did you serve all, would you say 106 months? Did you serve?
So I served 8 years. I was sentenced to 106, but through good time and whatnot, I was able to get to a halfway house earlier. And
nice.
Even though you're still kind of in prison in a halfway house, you're at least not surrounded by razor wire and whatnot. So you get to where you can, be released for a job and things like that. So it's one notch closer to, being a citizen, so to speak, again. So I did get out a little bit early. Was very thankful for that. But I tried to get out much earlier. I tried to enter programs within the prison system that get you more time off. But because I lied in my pre-sentencing trials, I didn't qualify for it. And so I had to learn that lesson too, very early on, that, honesty is always the best policy. And I can remember standing there being interviewed by, agents, and they're asking me about drug and alcohol use, and I lied about it. And I told them, no, I don't drink. I don't use drugs. And that was a complete lie. Had I been honest, I probably couldn't have been out earlier. But, everything works out for the best. And I tell people that I'm eternally grateful for those years, but I don't want to do it again.
Yep. Absolutely. So could you mention, you mentioned the prison fellowship. Could you talk about the role they played in your journey?
Yeah. So prison fellowship was actually started by a man who was very high up in politics in Washington, D.C. named Chuck Colson. He was actually incarcerated for his role in the Watergate scandal.
Oh, wow. Really?
And so he actually finished out his sentence at the very same place where I finished out my sentence. And a friend of mine mailed the book in that Chuck Colson wrote about his experience and what led him up to incarceration. And this was like Richard Nixon's hatchet man. I mean, he was like one of the, a feared individual within Washington, D.C. and national politics, and then found himself sitting behind the same fence that I was sitting at, ultimately. And so I read his book, and it turned me on to prison fellowship. So as I walked down my, my faith journey while incarcerated, Matthew 25 has always been very close to me since giving my life to Christ, because of what it instructs us to do. And one of the things that it tells us to do is visit the prisoners, right? Because we are called to set prisoners free. And that has multiple layers to it. But it always resonated with me because I saw so much suffering in there. I saw so much abandonment in there. I saw the epidemic of fatherlessness, every day, all day, the outpouring of it. And so it just really resonated with me because that's where my deepest wound comes from, that I wanted to make sure that I gave back to that. And so I've always had it in my mind to participate in whatever way I could to give back to men who are incarcerated. And so that was one that was very dear to my heart. So I made a pledge to myself that I would always do everything I could to either get back in prisons and preach, get back in prisons and just commune with the men in there. Whatever I could do, I asked for God to open those doors. And so I am involved in prison ministry. I do think that it is crucial because a lot of men don't have support. So any agency, any nonprofit that's out there that helps families with, post care for men getting out of prison, or even writing letters. I mean, you have no idea what receiving a letter from somebody can do for a person that doesn't receive letters from anybody. Wow. Just that correspondence, that looking forward to it, talking with somebody outside of those walls. It's so life-breathing. And I'm one of the fortunate cases. I had a lot of people that were writing me all the time. I had a great support system. But I know the effects of men not having it. So I want to make sure that I always am positioned to do whatever God leads me to do by way of helping out those and fulfilling those men that are incarcerated and fulfilling what Matthew 25 tells us to do.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lack in prison ministry and prison care, or do you think it's adequate? Or
I would say on a whole, I would probably say it's inadequate. I think that helping men transition is probably where majority of the inadequacies are. It's easy to have volunteers and whatnot go in facilities and preach, right? That seems to be, pretty widespread throughout the prison system. But where they fall short is, okay, what happens when this man is released? Yep. Especially for the men that don't have the support system. So where are the groups that can step in and help these men find jobs? Because the halfway houses don't do that. Mm-hmm. So having men who are biblically minded and having, Christ-centered, faith-based groups that are willing to step in and, help them with clothes, help them with, gas money, help them with whatever it takes, help them finding a residence, whatever it is, just that next step, right? Because when you come out of prison, your credibility is non-existent. And mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of things in prison that they tell you, or a lot of programs that say, you can get a job doing this, or you can get a job doing that. And so there's this false hope that's created. And then when men get out, they're told, well, you need to find a year, or you need to have a year experience. Well, if nobody's willing to give you that 1 year, that first jump, right, that first bit of experience, then it's very hard for men to climb that hurdle. Yeah. And so what happens? You have an 85% recidivism rate because they go back to what they know. Yep. So if they do have that one segue to where a group or a business or whomever can be that initial opportunity and say, we're going to take you in and we're going to give you a chance, it's a game changer.
Have you heard of the heroin epidemic in Vietnam?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what happened was people came back and never used again because they weren't around all the triggers. Mm-hmm. They weren't around it all. Mm-hmm. But you see now people go away to prison or some sort of recovery center, and then they go back to all the triggers. Mm-hmm. And you see that people keep they keep doing what they know because that's all they know in that location. Yep. And I think what would be nice to see is more, not necessarily, the only way I can really think to word it is people begin to see others not as human. Mm-hmm. Oh, they're a prisoner. They just came out of the prison system. They just came out of recovery. They just, I just saw them homeless 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They were just begging on the corner of Nottingham. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really easy for people to get others attached to their identity, but when they're in that situation, they want to be seen as human, not as a former identity. And
that's correct.
I think you end up seeing a lot of people that they're allowing others to be trapped when themselves wouldn't want to be. And it's really easy to do, honestly. Like if you see, I think not very many people have had the chance to see others as human in the same way that you have. Mm-hmm. So I think Well, what would be a few steps that you would take or ask others to take to begin to see others as human and start helping others in that journey?
Well, if you think, I can tell you where it started for me. The realization came from studying scripture. And when you get to the story about the rich man and Lazarus, and how the rich man would step over Lazarus at his gate and wouldn't even give him a crumb, that basically the man begging for food outside of his house was just a bother. Nobody knows the story that led that man to that position, right? But what we do know is that he had a need. And the bigger need was a spiritual need. But this rich man had the capability to fulfill a physical need. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I've always processed it since while incarcerated and coming out is, again, like I said earlier, I realized that I was no different than those men in that circle who were sharing and being vulnerable because we all were fatherless. I always think about it when I see somebody, begging for money in a parking lot or asking for food or whatever the case may be. What is their story? Mm-hmm. So the steps that I would say initially first is realizing that just because it hasn't happened to you, doesn't mean it can't, because nobody's above or beyond it. And also that this is a human being and they have a story. Yep. So what part of their story is it that maybe you can play a part of to make that impact that turns them around? Maybe you giving them $5 is something that keeps them alive long enough to where that person that's coming with that opportunity gets them there. Yeah. Anything along those lines. I think you have to have the mindset of, we're not here to be better than anybody else. We're not here to step on anybody else, but we're here to lift everybody up. Yep. And so if I see somebody who's in want, then what can I do to meet that immediate need? Mm-hmm. What can I do to give them a bottle of water or give them a bag of food or give them a ride or whatever the case may be? Because I know my job is not to save everybody. Yeah. Lord knows there's days where you wonder what you can do for yourself. But what I do know is when I'm walking around and I've got some money in my pocket, I've got gas in my truck, and I've got means, then I'm always in a position to help somebody. Yep. And as long as you're not doing something that's ultimately going to hurt them, because, you're not enabling, but if you can actually help them, then you may just be the conduit that gets them to that one big help that changes their life.
Yep. There's one thing I personally do is when I'm approached in that scenario, they're always asking for cash. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, I never have cash. I'm like, but I'm going into the store. I can get you something. What do you actually need? What do you have in front?
Exactly what I do.
Because I don't carry cash. I wish I did. I would feel a lot better using cash to buy gas every day. But, and it's like, whatever you need, I can actually get. Because I've had times in my life where, so there was a time where my wife and I, we hardly made ends meet, just barely. And we had $6 in the account, and we needed like beans and something else for dinner. So ran over to the store, and I have $6. So both cans are like $1. I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can afford both of them. But I made the decision to get the largest can of beans they had. It was $4. It was like everything we had. And she was so mad. I thought it was hilarious. We didn't use them. I just thought it was hilarious. I was like, I know at the end of the day, God's got us. Yeah. Like, he hasn't failed us yet. We've always had it. But I'll tell you now, 4 years later, I still remember that because I thought it was hilarious in the moment. I think it's hilarious now. But now that we've come out of that and I've got enough money to go to the grocery store when I need to, when someone approaches, it's like, something I think about is we, at our poorest, are richer than the richest man 2,000 years ago.
Oh, sure.
We sit in our house it's climate controlled. It's cold outside and it's warm in the house. It's hot outside and it's cold in the house. Mm-hmm. We go to sleep in like 8 inches of cloud. Mm-hmm. We wake up and we can have a hot shower whenever we want to. We don't have to go have somebody go heat up and boil water for us for 2 hours.
You don't have to carry it 2 miles either.
We don't have to carry it. We walk out of our climate-controlled house and get into our climate-controlled vehicle that can go 60 miles in an hour. Like, we are way better off than people ever were. But when you begin that comparison journey of either I'm better than they are or they are better than I am, that's when you begin to go down some journey, some place that you were never intended to go. You were like you were saying, we're intended to lift everybody up. We're intended to be hands and feet, and that's it.
So I can encapsulate it in one word, I think, interruption. So a pastor that I've studied a lot, he's actually a Roman Catholic priest, but he shared something in one of his books that I read that always stuck out to me that helped me see things through this lens. And he was a professor at Notre Dame, and he's a author, speaker, pastor, all these great accolades. And he said that he would get so frustrated for years when he was in his office because theological students wanted to come in and talk to him. They wanted to ask him questions about scripture. They wanted to ask him questions about this or that. And it was his time, right? He had it viewed as that this was his personal time. And so the interruption used to just drive him crazy. And he said, one day God laid it on his heart that actually, you're doing all these great things. You're speaking, you're writing, you're teaching, and whatever else. But God laid it on his heart that your real work is in the interruption. Mm-hmm. So when somebody comes to see you and knocks on that door, that's your work. And so I think about that in terms of people that we see who are in need, whether it be, an inmate in a prison, whether it be somebody walking up to you in a parking lot, whatever the case may be. We don't want to be bothered. We don't want to be interrupted.
Yep.
Right? We're trying to get in the store and get out. And so it just really got impressed on my heart, to your original question, that if you'll just embrace the interruption, that's where your real work is.
Yeah, that's good. So what way would you inspire nonprofits that are being hands and feet, that are focusing on the interruption already, that their 9 to 5, Monday through Friday is focused on helping others, or their 5 to 9 outside of their normal job, their weekends, every moment they have, they're out in the streets actually trying to help people? And what would you say to them to inspire them? Because you yourself were saved by God, but you were helped by that prison ministry,
Mm-hmm. So I think if you think about the context in the Gospels, that majority of people who got or received healing, or who got close to Jesus, it wasn't because Jesus came to them. It was because they went to Jesus, right? They went looking and they were healed. So my advice would be, don't sit back and wait on people to come to you. Go to them. Go where you know they are. Go where you know the need is. And then not only are you going to be able to be a conduit and a blessing for others, but you're going to be blessed too. And so God tells us that he blesses the work of our hands and our feet. He doesn't bless us sitting here twiddling our thumbs and with our hands in our lap, right? So he tells us that with his blessing, we have a role to play.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a matter of seeking. I think it's a matter of going out and reaching out to prisons, reaching out to halfway houses, reaching out to orphanages, boys groups, boys homes, girls homes, whatever, and kick the door in, take the bull by the horns, let them know, hey, here's what we do and here's how we can help.
Yeah.
And just see where it leads.
Do you think that, so originally you were talking about how you had a drive to accomplish your goals and to go after life. Do you think where you are now, that was originally a trait that God put in you to help the kingdom, that you accidentally used for yourself, that now is still, it's a catalyst that you're still using today?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny you say that, because this morning, or the past several days, actually, I've been reading Mark 11, 20 verses 21 through 25, roughly. And I think that what my parents had instilled in them through their growing up in the church and their family lives, they passed on to me, which is My parents always told me I can do anything I set my mind to, that whatever I wanted to accomplish, I could accomplish it. And I took that on, not in a theological sense, but just kind of in a bravado, confidence type sense. But then when I began to learn or unlearn religion and step into a world of faith, Mark 11 tells us that if you have faith in God and what you ask for in prayer, you believe that you're going to receive, and what you say is going to help that come to fruition, because, the power of life and death rests in the tongue. I firmly believe that when you live by that notion and that you literally do those things, that what you set out to do, you're going to accomplish, and you're going to accomplish them in a manner much greater than what you actually imagined in your human capacity.
Yeah.
Because when you pair yourself with his will, and you know that you're lining up with what he wants, and then you ask for it, and then you speak over it, and you call that into action, buckle up, because it's coming.
Yep.
It's coming.
I made a post not too long ago about how there's a difference between a thinker and a doer.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of people that want to think and pontificate and ruminate on all of these philosophical problems, but then you have people that just do. They have an idea and they just do it, and then they move to the next one, and they get more reps in, and at the end of the day, 5 years later, they end up in a completely different place than the person that has just been thinking the whole time. There's, I think it's really interesting that you end up being who you are from nature and nurture, but at the end of the day, Christ is still guiding and leading and pulling you toward him, pulling you toward what his goal is for your life. And I think it's really cool because if you speak it and you expect it, you can see it, and it might be a vision in your head right now, but you can see it kind of blurry, and years go by, and then it's there. These mics, for example, I wanted my own. I borrowed people's gear for years. I was borrowing microphones and cameras, and I was like, one day I'll have my own. I borrowed lights for years. I was borrowing everything. I was like, one day I'll have my own. And slowly, after donation after donation after donation, it took me about 4 years, but now we own the mics and the cameras and the light, which is crazy, because slowly I expected it, and I believed for it, and I prayed for it, and it was aligned with his will. And I think you have a lot of people, a lot of organizations, and a lot of well-meaning Christians that are seeing, expecting, believing, but haven't seen it yet. And what is it? Proverbs, where I completely lost it. What is it? Makes the heart grow sick. What's the word he uses there?
Is it fondness?
I can't remember.
So think about this, though. With the vision, that comes first. And then comes the provision, right?
Yep.
So a lot of people sit out there and they stew on that vision, but they never take the steps to get into the provision, right? So you got to get in the power of it. You got to learn the power of it, right? So when you think about, look at it like this. You and I could sit down right now and we could read a manual on how to fly a jet, a fighter jet, right? We could read that manual. But until you get in that cockpit, until you take off, until you learn all the buttons, until you learn how that thing moves and you feel the power of it, it's not the same.
Yep.
It's not the same. So our life with God, our life with Christ, learning the power of his word, not our words, is the same thing. You and I can sit there and read the Bible all day long. But until you actually take it out there into the world and start to use the tools that he gives you to live this life, there's a lot, unfortunately, that you're missing out on. A lot of joy, a lot of peace, a lot of everything that the word tells you he's going to give you. We have a role to play. He didn't just drop us in this spear and say, sit back, I'm just going to dump blessings in your lap and you don't have to do a single thing, right? I mean, if you think about the dynamic of a relationship, no matter in what realm of life you're in, there's always a reciprocation, right? So God wants to bless our efforts. He wants to bless our hands and our feet. He wants to bless our thoughts. He wants to bless what we do out there.
Yep.
But you got to operate in the power of it.
It's even the simple things like in Proverbs, he talks about how if, I'm drastically paraphrasing, but if you're, if somebody's angry at you, speak softly.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take that and actually use it, something so simple, so small, and actually use it. It works every time.
Mm-hmm.
You have a Karen yelling at you at the store, and all you're trying to do is bag her groceries, and then you speak softly, she will too.
Mm-hmm.
It defuses the situation every time. Mm-hmm. It's almost like God set it up to teach us how to live.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what he did. I mean, BIBLE, basic instructions before leaving Earth.
Yep.
Right? So it's an instruction manual. So our life outside of here or outside in the world is kind of like the jet, right? The Bible is the instruction manual.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go hop in that jet and try to take off without the instruction manual, but I wouldn't encourage you to do that. Because we've uncovered some things just in my own story that, you will go into the wall or you will fly off that aircraft carrier right into the ocean or whatever.
Yep.
So I think that if you view the Bible, if you view God's word as your instruction manual, I'm yet to find a situation, and I've been in a lot of sticky situations. I'm yet to find a situation that had I referred back to God's word, which is why he tells us, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness.
Yep.
Right? So if you do that, not going to say you're going to avoid every wall, but you can avoid a lot of them. You might clip a wing, but you're not going down in flames.
Yep.
But if you seek his kingdom and his righteousness, then world, life, relationships, everything looks completely different.
Everything gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone that wants to follow your journey, get connected, or message you directly, or try to get help from prison fellowship or anyone, how could they get in touch with you?
So I'm actually not on Facebook. I am on Instagram under JR Lanier, and I can send you a link to your Instagram page, so you can have it up there as well. Yeah. But I'm available to any and everybody who has questions about incarceration, has questions about drug and alcohol awareness or after treatment. I mean, you've done a podcast with a absolutely beautiful story about Motif in Albany, Georgia, women's sober living home. I have contacts throughout all of those channels. So I'll link in with you and put my information on your Instagram page, and any and everybody who has questions, a need, whatever, man, I'm here.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.